Joins me now, House Majority Whip Tom Emmer from Minnesota. Good to see you, Congressman. Thanks for being here. Okay, I'm going to give you a little time to make that case. It's tough medicine. Go ahead and make the case.
Well, look, the law is very clear, David, and great to be with you.
Thank you.
The law is very clear. If you defrauded the U.S. government, the U.S. authorities, to gain entrance into this country in the first place, it doesn't matter whether you're a naturalized citizen or not. You defrauded the government, you go back. What I'm saying is that if you have committed a crime, if you have been convicted of a crime, we're done having people come to this country, take advantage of our charity and our generosity. If you should be denaturalized, if you committed fraud of any kind, including, by the way, David, marriage fraud, you should be denaturalized and shipped back to your country of origin. And by the way, it should be expanded to Somali gangs, which we have a big problem with in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. This is a very serious problem. And to come to this country, it's a gift. This is a country that is generous beyond anyone's imagination. And these people have taken advantage of it, and they should be shipped back to Somalia.
Well, you say that even if they're naturalized citizens, it's part of the law. I imagine that there would be pushback on that. Would tweaks in immigration law have to be made for somebody who is a naturalized citizen who has tried to defraud U.S. citizens?
What I'm saying is, if they defrauded the government to gain entry in the first place, no, you don't have to adjust the law. But if they came to this country allegedly legally and they became a naturalized citizen, yes, we'll have to tweak the law a bit. We're working on that right now. Because if you came to this country and you gained citizenship and then you committed fraud and you've been convicted of it, an adjustment of the law, you should be treated just the same way someone who defrauded the country to gain entry in the first place is treated. You should be shipped back home.
And you slipped in something there. I think I know what your reference is, but I just want to put a fine point on it, that if that includes marrying your own brother, I assume you're talking about Ilhan Omar and some of the rumors circulating about that story. Is that who specifically you're referring to? Could a member of Congress be among those who could be shipped back?
I think Ilhan Omar needs to be investigated just as strongly as, and I really appreciate Chair Comer calling in Tim Walz and Keith Ellison. They haven't been held accountable for 7 years. Ilhan Omar needs to be investigated to the fullest extent. This is a woman who just a couple years ago, David, was reporting a net worth of about $65,000. And now just a couple years later, she's reporting a net worth of like $30 million. There's corruption here. It smells to high heaven that needs to be investigated. And by the way, if any of this is proven, if they have committed a crime, yes, I don't care what your position is in this country. If you have been naturalized as a citizen and you have committed a crime, you've stolen taxpayer dollars, you should be denaturalized and shipped back to your country of origin.
Let's talk about what happened last night. HHS announcing that it was not going to be sending any more money to Minnesota. They're freezing these payments that were going, and some of which a lot of which were diverted by the efforts of fraudsters. I just want to play a soundbite from the Assistant Secretary of HHS talking about it. Roll it.
Any dollar stolen by fraudsters is stolen from those children. Yesterday, I spoke directly with the director of the Minnesota Child Care Services Office. She could not tell me with confidence whether those allegations of fraud are isolated or whether there's fraud stretching statewide.
How long do you think it's going to take to straighten out those questions of who was involved, how long it's been going on, and directly the involvement of federal money, of taxpayer money?
Well, first off, Tim Walz has done nothing to look into this. Keep in mind, we have the largest, they're estimating this could be as much as $9 billion in fraud. Minnesota has been in the news previously for the largest pandemic fraud case in the country, $250 million. David, 86 people were charged with defrauding the government of that money. 90% of those people were from the Somali community. They've got 60 convictions, I believe, already. Guess what? No one in Tim Walz's administration has been even mentioned. No one has been called to task for being responsible for supervision of those monies. So it's imperative that this investigation get done. And I'm going to tell you, This dates back to when Tim Walz first became governor and Keith Ellison first became the attorney general. The previous attorney general, another Democrat, Lori Swanson, was investigating daycare fraud in 2017 and 2018. She ran for the Democrat endorsement for governor against Tim Walz. She lost. Guess what? Keith Ellison replaced her, and what was his first action as Attorney General in Minnesota? There would be no more investigations of these alleged fraudulent actions, whether it's child care centers, autism centers, you name it, unless he approved it personally. And guess what? He didn't approve any of them.
Well, and then in
this
2021,
thing goes to the highest level.
We heard that audio tape of him in 2021 meeting with some of these fraudsters, suggesting that they wouldn't have to worry about all the investigations, and ending up that conversation suggesting that maybe a contribution or two would be acceptable under these circumstances. And then you have the governor himself. I mean, we have this statement from the Social Security Workers Union, the Minnesota Social Security workers, saying that whistleblowers were intimidated by the governor when they came in to offer evidence of fraud. That's against the law. Not only are there federal statutes, but Minnesota state has a very strong whistleblower law that they need to be protected. Are you going to try to subpoena him to come in and speak before the various committees, including the Oversight Committee in Congress, to answer charges about this?
That will be handled by Jamie Comer and his committee. I understand over on the Senate side, Senator Ron Johnson has said he's going to be following a similar investigation. But let's be clear. Letting billions of dollars be bilked from Minnesota taxpayers out of your state government, it's definitely gross negligence, David, but somebody was complicit. And if it's the governor, if it's the attorney general, I don't care who it is, they need to be held accountable and they need to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law if they were complicit.
Okay. Finally, and this actually could end up being bigger than everything we've been talking about, there are questions about voting fraud and whether some of the lax policies, at best to say lax policies, but some people would say complicit, the voting fraud is a big question right now. I didn't know this, but Minnesota Secretary of State offices says one registered voter can vouch for up to 8 other people to come in when voting. That is, he would vouch for them and swear on some little piece of paper that, yes, they're citizens and they're registered to vote. Are you concerned that there was voting fraud or that there may be voting fraud going into the midterm elections as a result of this new application of what you need to become a registered voter?
I've been concerned for years, David, and I would add, in this case, Pam Bondi, at the Department of Justice, has specifically requested that the Minnesota Secretary of State provide the U.S. Department of Justice with all of Minnesota's voting records over the last handful of elections. She and the federal government are responsible for the federal elections, election of the president, election of U.S. senators, of members of the U.S. House of Representatives. The federal government is entitled to those records. David?
Yeah.
The Secretary of State is refusing to provide the records that have been requested. He's forcing the Trump administration to bring an action in court. If you have nothing to hide, you would turn those things over.
Absolutely.
They're refusing to do that.
I didn't know that. Don't you have subpoena power to get that?
Look, there's already an action. Pam Bondi has already started an action against the state of Minnesota to get the records that the federal government is rightfully entitled to.
Boy, so much to be done. Tom Emmer, great to see you, sir. Have a very happy new year. It's going to be a busy 2026. Appreciate you coming in.
Happy New Year.